9 essential tips for parents of teenage sons and their anger. When your teenage son starts acting out, it can be hard to know how to handle him. In this video, I'm going to show you some strategies that will help you get through the tough times and raise a respectful and loving teen. Hi, my name is Bill Reinecke, and for the past 20 years, I've been working with parents of teenage sons who are struggling with their child's behavior. It can be really tough when your kid suddenly becomes disrespectful or doesn't care about anything anymore. But in this video, I'll share with you what has helped me build stronger relationships with my own children while raising them as they become teenagers themselves. I'm going to share strategies to develop a deep emotional relationship with your teenage boy. Being a parent is not easy. Parenting teenagers can be a very stressful and challenging time in life. This is a time when boundaries are tested, voices are raised, and doors are slammed, and books and personal items are tossed. When we see our teenage boys acting this way and expressing anger, it can be very upsetting and unsettling, to say the least. Teenage boys can often present with anger and episodes of moodiness. As they get older and progress into adolescence, these behaviors and presentations become more common. As we see our teenage boys entering and becoming somewhat consumed with puberty, it's important to realize that their behaviors will change. The hard part as parents is that we begin to miss the cute little boy behaviors as they are transformed into more adult-like behaviors. Although the anger and outburst are not appropriate, they are no longer childish-like behaviors. The first thing that's important is to realize that there are a lot of changes, not just physical, but emotional as well, taking place with our teenage boys. The anger and moodiness and short tempers are expressions that are often coming from some displaced emotion or anger. There are other stressors that need to be considered, such as peer pressure. Oftentimes, our teenage boys will engage in drinking or smoking or even drugs and sexual activity. All of these things can intensify the behaviors that we're seeing. It's not uncommon to see teenage boys teeter between spending time with family and being pleasant and isolating to be alone, or separating themselves for periods of time to be with friends. It's important to always remember that the behaviors we are seeing are communication. You might be asking, what is my teenage son trying to communicate? This is a very good question. And we don't always know, and neither do they. But what we do know is that for every behavior we see, whether good or bad, it is communicating a present state of being. For example, if your teenager is happy and energetic and communicating, this is an indication that things are going well with them. On the other hand, if they're angry and they can't verbalize what is making them angry, it is clear that there is some kind of unmet need present. They may or may not always be aware of what this need is. As parents, it's important, though, that we realize that all acting out behaviors are signs and indications or communication of some kind of unmet need. Bad behavior never happens in a vacuum. Here are some tips that can help with alleviating the anger that you see. There are many warning signs that you should also be aware of and look out for, which could be a sign that something more is going on. You may feel like you don't know your son any longer because they are so different from what they were 6 months or even a year ago. But don't forget, you are their parents and you are the expert on who they are and what their needs are. 1. Set clear rules and expectations regarding acting out behaviors. Setting clear expectations early and before an acting out or angry behavior is encountered is extremely important and valuable for both you and your son. Set clear rules and expectations when your son is calm and rational. These rules and expectations or boundaries will be present when your son is experiencing and expressing anger. Let your son know that it is okay to express and communicate their feelings regardless of what they need. It's important to educate them on appropriate ways to express themselves. It's during this time when they are rational that setting the expectations of not using foul language or name calling when they are angry. It's important to let them know and remind them that it's never appropriate or okay. It's also important that you address physical boundaries and expectations. Expressing one's feelings should never be done in a physical or harmful way either to themselves or anybody else. Feel free to create your own rules and expectations around your son expressing himself. This is especially important for single mothers or parents that are considerably smaller than their adolescent teenage sons. When your son presents with anger or acting out behaviors of any kind, it's important to respond appropriately. This would mean that if they are getting anxious or angry, for example, that you respond by maintaining your rationale and not yelling back. It's very important during this time that you don't put their behavior on them and make them feel or accuse them of being bad. It is helpful to validate and express some understanding of where they're at. Maybe you're aware that something has happened in their life, or perhaps they've had a bad day and expressed understanding that they are having a difficult time. It's helpful to validate and express some understanding of where they are at. Maybe you're aware that something has happened in their life, or perhaps they've had a bad day and you've expressed understanding that they are having a difficult time. This is also a good time to direct them back to the rules and expectations. Remember that when a person becomes angry or begins to become angry, they begin to lose rationale. It's important to be directive during this time, and this is done by reminding your teenager of the rules and expectations that were discussed when they were in a rational and calm state. Number 3, give your teenage son control of the situation and their behavior. This is a great opportunity to teach your son to be in control. Teenage boys want to take control of situations in their life more often and struggle with how to do this. This can be one of the reasons for the acting out behaviors that are often seen and also cause power struggles between teenage boys and their parents. It's important to continue to communicate during those difficult moments when you are encountering an acting out behavior. This is a time also to empower your teenage son by reminding them that they are in control of the situation and their behavior. This is a great time to ask questions about what kind of outcome they would like to have when they are calmed down. Help them take control of the situation by encouraging them and reminding them that they can manage their anger. Number 4, don't take anger and acting out behaviors personally. This is easier said than done. Quite often when we are dealing with an angry teenage son or inappropriate acting out behavior, it is not uncommon for the parent to feel at fault. In fact, it is common for the blame and control of the behavior to be placed on the parent. There may be things that are said that are hurtful that may have some truth to them. This is beside the point at this moment. What is important is that the anger becomes managed and rationale restored so that the discussion that is productive can be had. This is a time when it is most important to rationally detach from the situation and separate yourself. This means that you treat them like you would any other adult in this situation. Don't think of them as your son or little boy that you lost. Keep in mind the outcome. Number 5, avoid protecting your son from their behavior. This goes along with giving responsibility to your son for their behavior. When you are dealing with an inappropriate, angry, acting out behavior, as there is no acceptable reason for this. Explain to your son emotions and feelings are okay to have no matter what they are, but it's not okay for them to control his behavior. Avoid making excuses for their angry outburst or inappropriate behaviors just because they had a hard day or are depressed or their girlfriend broke up with him is not a reason to act inappropriately toward their parent or become physically aggressive. 6. Listen for the real message. Listening can be one of your biggest allies. This is a time to actively listen and ask questions about what is going on. Keeping in mind that acting out behaviors are signs of unmet needs or something that is missing, there is never a good reason for the acting out behavior, though. Let your son know that you are on their side and that you are not their enemy. This is done by listening and asking questions. This shows that you are supportive of their feelings. This should never be confused with validating or normalizing bad behaviors. It is good if you can sit down with your son and get them to become expressive about their feelings. It is often difficult for teenage boys to express their feelings. If you can teach them to do this in a normal manner, they will be much better men. Ask questions in a way that gets your teenage son to talk and express the situations and feelings they face. By doing this, removes you from being in a position where you sound accusatory. If they can come to the realization on their own that what they're doing is not appropriate, things will work out much better. 7. Minimize negative influences. While your son would tell you that they're not influenced by peer pressure or swayed by any negative influence, this is simply not true. While this is not something that you can discuss with him and convince him otherwise, it's important to minimize negative influences in his life. It's important that you keep in mind that you will not remove all negative influences, but you can do your best to minimize the negative peer pressure and negative media that your son experiences. Nowadays, peer pressure and video games go hand in hand. Our kids don't just sit down to a video game. They communicate and hang out online while playing video games with other kids and can be easily and heavily influenced and ideas shared and embraced. When they're hanging out with these groups online that are not positive and beneficial for them, we begin to see associated behaviors and attitudes. Don't just discourage negative influences, but encourage positive ones also. It's important that we don't just take things away from our teenage sons, but that we introduce them to positive and enjoyable things that they would find interesting. This is a great way to build a relationship as they grow and mature into adults. 8. Make sure basic needs are getting met. As your teenage son grows and becomes more independent, it is easy to lose sight of some of the most basic and important needs. These are diet and sleep. When your teenage son begins sleeping less and hanging out with friends more, they are likely to become sleep deprived. When they are short of sleep, it is easy for them to be short-tempered and easily angered. Diet also plays a big role in the emotional and behavioral well-being of your son. If your teenage son is eating more junk food than healthy food, this can also affect his mood and behavior. Encourage good sleep habits. Also try to make healthy snacks and meals available. This will help with hunger and poor food choices that can be made when he is out on his own. 9. Look for deeper problems. It is important to know your son and realize that some of the behaviors, if not most of them, are normal teenage behaviors. It's important, though, to train your son on the behaviors and if anger is an issue, to teach him to manage it. This may require professional help from a licensed therapist. It is, however, important to be able to recognize normal teenage behavior and those behaviors that are not normal. For example, it's normal for a teenage boy to isolate from the family and spend more time with friends. It's not normal, however, for a teenage boy to completely remain to himself and isolate himself from family and friends into a dark room for a prolonged period of time. It is normal for teenage boys to experience some level of depression and withdrawal, but it is not normal for a teenage boy to be depressed longer than 2 weeks. This would be an indication that something more is going on and additional help from a professional would be needed. I hope these tips help in dealing with your son and their acting out behavior. These tips can be universally used and effective with an acting out teenage daughter also. A bonus tip I'd like to leave with you is to identify your son's strengths. What are they good at? What stands out about them in a positive way? If you need to list them on a piece of paper, do so. Acknowledge them to your son. Build and focus on their strengths and avoid focusing on the negative things that happen. Make it a mission to always get back to the strengths and positive qualities of your son. If you found this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching.